Well, we also took to the streets to ask views of young people because we want you to be part of this show. We wanted to know what are the disadvantages and also the advantages of opening up borders right here in South Africa. Our producer here at SABC, Vhutshilo Mogashoa, spoke to students from the University of Johannesburg about the SADC Summit and also giving them an opportunity to step into the shoes of the regional leaders and also debate on some key challenges facing the southern region of Africa. Let's now go and hear what they had to say.
Thank you so much, Azaria, and to your viewers at home. Yes, indeed, we're coming to you live from the streets of Johannesburg, where we took a walk outside the building. We're just here at the University of Johannesburg to talk to some of the students from the University of Johannesburg, just to hear what their thoughts are with regards to opening the borders, because most people are saying that it might work in our favor. Some are saying it might not really work in our favor when you're looking at issues around the security. So I'm joined now by two students who comes from the University of Johannesburg. Ladies, welcome so much. Thank you so much for your time for joining us. Now, the theme for this year's summit for the SADC region says resilient, sustainable and inclusive industrialization through infrastructure development, agricultural and critical minerals transformation in pursuit of a just world. What do you guys understand about this theme?
I think if I focus more on the resilience part, creating resilience when we all work together in the SADC region as Southern African countries, we can build resilience because there's power in numbers, there's powers in coming together, and when we aren't divided, we can truly conquer more avenues such as infrastructure, such as minerals, because we're bringing everything that we all have and we're putting it together, and that creates more richness and wealth within our countries.
Now let's talk about opening the borders of the SADC region. Do you guys think that if we are to continue doing that or to proceed with that decision, do you see it as something that can benefit ordinary people in the region of SADC?
Okay, I'll go for that one. So I do see that there can be an economic benefit because we all have different strengths in our respective countries, and if we could bring our economies together in terms of our resources, and resources maybe that South Africa has that Zimbabwe doesn't have, and putting them together, that could truly boost our economy instead of having to rely on Western countries or maybe outside our region. Rather, we look within ourselves, within the different resources that we have, within the different opportunities that we have, and bringing those opportunities to our SADC countries. So yes, I think there can be an economic benefit for sure.
Now to you, could you say that opening the borders can boost trade and economic opportunities between the SADC countries? If so, how?
Yes, I do think so. And I think one of the missions of this SADC Summit is to essentially alleviate the tariffs to make trade easier between the African countries. And I think this boosts the economic growth of the SADC countries as a whole in general, because now we're relying more on ourselves as Southern African countries rather than externally, such as the West, where maybe tariffs could be higher. So alleviating tariffs between ourselves would very much boost the economic growth between our countries, and it would essentially allow us to help each other, like going hand in hand with the theme to transform and to ensure resilient, sustainable economic growth across our infrastructure industries, our agricultural and mineral industries. So that methodology, I think, would help increase our economic growth.
Well, very well said right there. Now let's talk about the legality of everything. You guys are law students, right? So now tell me, from a legal point of view or perspective, what challenges could arise from having more open borders?
I think that this does pose quite a big challenge. In terms of law, sovereignty of a country is extremely valuable, and we need to respect the sovereignty of each country. So South Africa, the other SADC countries, they all have their own cultures, their own constitutions, their own bills of rights. And as much as our law is similar, it's not exactly the same. So there would have to be a complete reform of which law governs us, and how do we pick whose law will govern us? How do we pick who our leader is? I think that creates a bit of a conflict, especially considering the leadership within our countries already, and the conflict within ourselves as the countries, like within the specific countries is already conflict within our legal systems. So now bringing other legal systems might create a bit of a challenge.
Yes, now let's talk about what was happening right here in South Africa when we had a March on March. There's xenophobic attacks. So now most people were saying that illegal immigrants were coming to perform different kinds of crimes in the country. So don't you think that having our borders open would put us more at risk?
I do think that there is a real risk in opening the borders because it just increases the influx of people coming in and out of the country. However, I do think that it still rests on the executive to enforce the law, to enforce protecting not just citizens but foreigners as well. You know, protecting migrants from being exploited within the country. So essentially, yes, there is a risk posed with crimes. However, I think really it does depend on the police, the military, and all of these law enforcement agencies at the border and within our country to essentially manage that risk.
So now let's talk about the criminality part of it as we continue with that topic. What about human trafficking? Could greater freedom of movement make it more difficult or governments to prevent trafficking?
I think that I'm not sure that eradicating borders would necessarily curb the human trafficking issue. I think it could actually create a bigger human trafficking issue because the borders actually create a situation where people are checked, people are controlled in terms of what they bring into a country, what they take out of a country, and so that can help with finding out if human trafficking is happening at that moment. So I think it could create an issue. It could create a challenge. However, of course, as my colleague had said earlier, that crime in general is not necessarily a border issue. It's an issue with executive. It's an issue with how its laws are enforced, and law enforcement is not about whether or not we work together as SADC. It's about, is our leadership good enough to enforce what the law says, and the law is against human trafficking, and so our enforcement should ensure that that is correctly managed.
And now let's talk about what the SADC countries and their systems are up to. Do you think the SADC countries have the systems and cooperation needed to manage more open borders effectively so?
I think that there have been some contributions made diplomatically between the African countries, between the SADC countries. We've seen talks by the president talking essentially about our relationships with the other SADC countries in our region. And I do think that, first of all, the summit is a plus in getting everyone together to discuss the issues that we as the SADC countries face. And so I do think that there is a potential for our relationships to get stronger, and with this uniting theme of the SADC Summit to actually build resilience and transformation across all of our countries, because we're not a no man's land, we're not just an island. We work together as a whole, as all of the countries together.
So now, ultimately, would you support greater freedom of movement within the SADC countries? Why not?
I think ultimately I would support it. However, it's about enforcement. It's a lot to just talk and say this would be great, but can we enforce it? We already have issues within our countries. There's already an issue with our leadership. We see the corruption that is happening. So how much more then when we create a bigger population to manage? I just hope that if this does come to fruition, that we would have good leadership, we would install good accountability, so that everything that we have said, every plan that we have made actually comes to fruition, and we see the success that Southern African countries can actually attain when they work together.
So now, if you two are to sit down with the SADC leaders today, would you say to them, open the borders, keep the current system, or open them but with a stronger control? Why and why not?
I personally think that we should make it a phased thing, like to maybe phase it in. Maybe we can maybe make phase 1, 2, and 3, where the first one would be ensuring that our enforcement is up to scratch, that our borders are properly maintained, so that we already know that should an adverse event happen, we have the people that can essentially fix that issue. And then from then, once we've actually established a basis of safety, of security, then we can move on to opening, to increasing the freedom of movement, because at least we know that there are going to be people who will protect the country, and they wouldn't just be anyone just coming in and out. And essentially, also because there is great merit in aligning all of our economies together. So I do think that this is an opportunity that we shouldn't miss, especially when we as Africans can sustain ourselves as opposed to outsourcing our resources. I do think that the solution starts here, and we should first essentially fix how we manage ourselves, and then as that phases, as we phase all of the Southern African countries, as we fix our security issues, then we can actually talk about freedom of movement.
Thank you very much, ladies. Thank you so much for your time. Well, there you've heard it, to open the borders or not to open the borders. And remember that opening the borders could bring great opportunities. Yes, we agree. That would be for the region of the SADC, but also it comes with greater risks. The challenge for SADC is to find the right balance between the two. I am Vhutshilo Mogashoa for SABC News right here in Johannesburg.